Chris Waddell, welcome to the show. First and foremost, man, I'm extremely grateful that you're here. I had the honor of already sitting in a meeting before we, of course, are recording this and have heard your story. I actually walked in immediately after the meeting to the studio and told my guys, told Alex, told Louie, that be prepared because this guy is a freaking powerhouse of impact. So with that being said, I'm grateful for you. I'm also grateful for Symetra, who is, sponsoring this show, got you here, and they are a phenomenal organization led by some phenomenal people. So, man, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me here. And obviously, this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be awesome. Before we hit record, I asked Chris, give me 3 keywords, like what you'd see on Netflix, what you see on Amazon Prime, and you had said, what were your 3 keywords and what we want the viewer, the listener to get across, in this show?
Yeah, I think resilience, heroes, and you know what? Let's go with the third one of performance.
Performance,
Yeah.
all right. And then I'm going to add the 4th called riveting, because to me, your story, I love story. Louie and I were talking about earlier what makes a great speaker in today's world, and he and I were just kind of going back and forth, and to me, it's those that have the ability to connect. Everybody communicates, very few connect, but also the power of the story, the storytelling, and getting to hear your story already once. It's jaw-dropping to me. And so with that, I'm going to give you a proper introduction.
Cool.
And then we do have a Patreon account, and those are our top supporters of the show. I always ask a question to get things rolling. It's a question that really hits home to why we do the show. And then from there, man, it's your time to shine. It's your life story. There's going to be a lot to unpack there. So let's do this. Introduction. And this comes off chriswaddellinc.com. That's where you can find Chris. So we'll start off with Meet Chris Waddell. The Dalai Lama celebrated Chris's impact on the world by naming him an Unsung Hero of Compassion in 2005. And this is where it gets super powerful. If that isn't already a banger to start off an introduction. Here are your career highlights. The Dalai Lama's Unsung Hero of Compassion, obviously 13 Paralympic medals, Paralympic Hall of Fame, most medals of any male monoskier in Paralympic history, World Champion Winter and Summer Sports, U.S. Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame, Doctor of Humane Letters, Middlebury College. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
First Ambassador of International Paralympic Committee, founder, this is your foundation, One Revolution Foundation, which I'm waiting to hear more about, and we'll get to that here in the show. First nearly unassisted paraplegic to summit Mount Kilimanjaro. This is one that stands out too, if that isn't enough. People Magazine's 50 Most Beautiful People. Skiing Magazine's 25 Greatest Skiers in North America. NPR, The Best Graduation Speeches Ever, Middlebury College, 2011. Chris's genuine, personal, and considerate delivery aims to connect and instruct, something he sought even as a competitor. As he became the fastest monoski in the world, he and his female counterpart started a monoski instructional camp to help others unlock their potential without enduring the pain and frustration that they had. Members of those camps went on to win national, world championship, and Paralympic medals. When he attempted to become the first unassisted paraplegic to summit Mount Kilimanjaro, he stood on the shoulders of his heroes to turn the impossible into reality and give others the courage to confront their fears, to live and perform most fully. The climb wasn't without incident. His team had to carry him up a boulder field, but the failure allowed him to separate from the obligation to be a superhero, to be honest, vulnerable, to find his real power. In 2015, he published his first book, Things I Want to Remember, Not to Forget. Inspired by his Middlebury College commencement address, the following year he taught himself to draw and wrote and illustrated his first children's book, Is It Lonely to Be a Four-Leaf Clover? He has appeared on Dateline, Oprah in 2020, as well as providing color commentary for the Paralympics on NBC and being one of People's Magazine's 50 Most Beautiful People. Obviously, you're a phenomenal keynote speaker, Chris. You help audience become champions of their businesses, their worlds, and themselves. And you have spoken to every big logo that is out there underneath the sun. And with that, man, when you hear all that, how does that make you feel?
It's interesting, right? Because I think that the part of it is confidence is the thing that allows us to be successful, right?
Yeah.
In most of our lives. But we're also, it's a fleeting thing, right? It's easy to lose the confidence. And I list some of that stuff in my office. I have a little reminder of why I should be confident. So I hear some of those things. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did that, So it's like, as we move forward, we need to remember what we did in the past too.
Man, I love it. All right. So we have a Patreon account. They're our top supporters. And part of that Patreon account is an organization called School of Man. They build healthier, more resilient men, have changed countless lives across the country and generations for our future men. They have changed lives for the younger men as well. They have a question for you, and this is a great way to start off the show. Name a time in your life that you're most proud of when it comes to that quiet, heroic moment that no one has ever seen.
It's always a question for me. The quiet, heroic moment. Sometimes we know what we know who inspires us, but we don't often know who we inspire, in a heroic moment. And so it's interesting with my accident, looking back on it, the year before my accident, I was at a ski race. And this woman with one leg showed up at the ski race, a woman named Diana Golden. And my first thought was, what's she doing here? And then I watched her ski, and she was there for the very same reason that I was there, that this was the best race she could get in. These were the people who were going to push her to be at her best. And in a lot of ways, she was the best athlete that I'd ever seen because she didn't really have time for the excuses. She was like, look, I'm going to fall down and I'm going to get back up. And she was the best representation of what it meant to be a human being in that same respect, in that that's exactly what we're all going to do. So looking at Diana in a lot of ways, before my accident, I wanted to follow in her footsteps. After my accident, I really wanted to follow in her footsteps the same way, in that you could create a transformational path, I think. And so some of the bigger moments for me, if you want to call them heroic moments, I said early on, and we talked about this earlier today, was that I wanted to be the fastest monoskier in the world. And it was an unrealistic goal in a lot of ways, because based on my level of lesion, the vertebrae that I broke, I shouldn't have been competitive with the fastest monoskiers, people who had muscles well below, I basically have the muscles right below my sternum to work with as far as balance is concerned. And a lot of these guys had some muscles in their legs, et cetera, et cetera. So they had an advantage in that respect. And so becoming the fastest monoskier in the world, to me, which I was able to do in Lillehammer, Norway, was probably a heroic moment in that sense of realizing something that wasn't possible, but it was also taking it and making it about the sport, which we know the nature of sport is adapting to that sport, finding a way to continue to enhance what we do well, but continuing to learn and progress in what we don't do well. And so that moment for me was probably my biggest moment in sport. And would it be heroic? I think it was heroic in the sense that it was a message, a human message, in that, it's really easy to find people who are going to tell you no, really easy to find people who are going to tell you can't do something, but it's really fulfilling to figure out how you can take that problem and solve that problem. And I was able to solve it that day in Lillehammer, Norway. Man,
that is powerful. Well, look, I want to do a life story on you.
Yeah.
And we'll start off with, where you grew up, obviously, and you take it wherever you want.
Okay.
And I know that it's an incredible adventure, incredible ride that you've been on. Something that you had said earlier before we kind of get started, you have an ethos. I kind of equate it to life either happens to you or it happens for you. You say something a little different. It's
similar but different. Yeah. I think the motto for me is it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. Things are going to go wrong, right? No matter who we are. And it's a matter of figuring out how we can reshape that situation and learn from that situation. But also, things are going to go wrong. It's a matter of the most successful among us are going to find a way to be successful out of what seems like a really difficult situation.
Well, all right. Well, look, let's start off with your childhood.
Yeah.
And then let's go from there, man.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. I mean, I was born in Methuen, Mass. So I was born outside of Boston and grew up most of my life in a place called Granby, Massachusetts. People would not necessarily know much about Granby. I think it was about 5,000 in population. We were a 1.5 stoplight town. So we had one full stoplight and a blinking red. So so maybe it's 1 1/3. I'm not sure how the math works on that, but that's how big we were. If you were big into dinosaur tracks, you might know where it was. There was a lot of shale. So we ended up with some dinosaur tracks, but it was about an 1.5 west of Boston, 45 minutes west of the accent. The accent stops, what you consider the Boston accent, stops around Worcester kind of thing.
Okay.
And so I was about 45 minutes west of there. Skiing was a huge part of my life growing up, even though it was not a big mountain. I grew up at a place called Mount Tom, which is about 680 feet of vertical. So like about half the height of the Empire State Building.
Skiing in Massachusetts?
Oh, yeah.
Is
Skiing
it really?
in Massachusetts, yeah. And it was owned by a construction company. And the patriarch of this construction company loved the mountain. And they had great snowmaking. They had lights. Their motto was always white, day or night. And so they made a lot of snow. So it was straight out of the snow gun. You'd often go up the lift covering your goggles so that they wouldn't get all crusted with ice and snow and everything as you were going up. But and they had lights on until 9 o'clock at night. So it lit up the Connecticut River Valley and raised a lot of kids in that generation. Really, parents could drop you off and pick you up at 9 o'clock at night and go back home kind of thing. And it's where I started racing. A place called the trail was called the Boulevard, and did a lot of laps there. My first coach was probably one of my first heroes, separate from like my parents in a lot of ways. A guy named Rob Broadfoot, who was a recent graduate. And he was doing graduate work at Springfield College, which is close by, but was a coach at heart and wanted to coach as he was doing his graduate work. And so I thought he walked on water. And it was, I was 6 years old, and I would go over every day. My parents taught skiing at the mountain. They'd pick us up, and my brother and me, my brother's 2.5 years younger than me, they'd pick us up and drive us over. And we would be there, sometimes until 9 o'clock at night, even as little kids.
Did your parents have a great relationship?
My parents really did. My parents, got together early in life and started a family early in life. My mother had turned 21, 26 days before she had me.
Oh, wow.
My father was a year older. And, I look back at it and kind of wonder how they were able to do it. It was just the responsibility at a young age of having children and trying to feed and clothe and provide for a household at a young age. But my father was a teacher. My mother started in teaching. My mother eventually went into social work, and they were kids of the 60s, and I think that in a lot of ways they had that belief that they could go and change the world. And we lost my father in October, and my mother 6 years ago. But they played together, throughout their whole lives, and both of them were really lucky, I guess, in some ways. I mean, unlucky for us that we didn't have them around as long as we wanted, but they were both doing what they wanted to do. My mother was teaching a ski lesson, adaptive ski lesson, had a heart issue and ended up, having, after surgery, some complications in surgery, dying that day. And my father had raced a 5K the weekend before he died. And you kind of look at it and go, I hope in some ways that I can maintain that same sort of quality of life. But they had a great relationship themselves, and we're really creative. I mean, you talk about the idea of being rich. We were not financially rich, but we were really rich in experience. And the important part of, I think they instilled that in us, that it was the people that you surrounded yourself with. It was growing and learning, and it was continuing to move forward. They were nothing if not sedentary, or they were not sedentary.
They were always moving.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
they were always in movement. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
And then you said you had a brother. Is that right? Do you have any other siblings outside of?
A younger brother. That's it. Just brother? The two of us. Yep.
Okay. And then obviously you grew up young skiing. Like that was your thing. That seemed like your parents' thing. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, my father learned to ski when he was in high school. My grandfather had worked. He did turbines for General Electric, and he was all over the world. And when my father was in high school, he was working in Spain, and my father ended up going 1 year in Switzerland to, I can't even think of the name of it. It was actually the same school where Antoine Saint-Exupéry went, the guy who wrote The Little Prince. They weren't there at the same time, but, that's the connection. And my father started skiing then. And, because they had whatever, some day of skiing or whatever a week, and brought it back. And he ended up teaching my mother how to ski, which is usually a recipe for disaster. You're not supposed to teach I think they were dating at the point. So boyfriend or girlfriend to ski seems like a good way to ruin the relationship, but it worked for the two of them. And and it was a huge part of what they wanted to do. They were creative. They had a variety of different jobs, and ski instructing was part of the job that helped supplement our lives and let us do what we wanted to do.
I have an 11-year-old son, Landon, and one of the things that I hope that as he goes through life, he looks back and says, you know what, this was my fondest memory of my dad. Like, do you have one of those memories, like of you and your dad, maybe skiing or doing something that just really sticks out to you that you can keep with you forever?
I think in a lot of ways we did a lot of things together. My father was a coach growing up, coached our soccer teams. After not playing soccer himself, so learned how to coach and everything. We ran a lot together. We biked a lot together. But I think really probably the biggest one was when I first started monoskiing. My parents came out and taught me how to monoski. They'd never seen one. I'd never seen one. We'd never seen anyone skiing one. Skiing was skiing in some ways, right? It's kind of like you put the ski on edge, you put pressure on it, you make the ski bend. That's how you make a turn, right? And we kind of thought, okay, well, we should have enough knowledge between all of us here. And we didn't really know what was going on. Learning to monoski was a lot of falling, which I imagine that when I first learned to ski, it was a lot of falling as well. Sort of that life lesson of you're going to fall down, you get back up. But yeah, that was probably the biggest one, just because it was transitional in that my life had changed, but it was also preservational in that it was preserving who I was as a person and who we were as a family. So collectively, we got together and I learned how to ski as a result of the effort from all of us. And I think that's probably the one. I mean, there were so many, but that's probably the most profound one in my life.
And so skiing, of course, obvious, is a big part of your family's identity and a part of your life. You competitively skied through high school, right? Like that was
high
that was your
and
sport.
Then into college, yes.
Into college.
Yeah.
So as you get into college, who did you go to ski for in college?
I skied at a place called Middlebury College in Vermont.
Okay, I got you. So from Middlebury, and you're skiing at Middlebury. At what point, though, did life change?
Life changed pretty early. So I started in the middle of the year, my first year at Middlebury, and trained with the team, but didn't compete for the team. The next year was effectively going to be like my freshman year of competing, my first year of competing for the school, hopefully. And right before I was hopefully going to compete for the team, I went home for Christmas vacation. And you continue to train when you're at home. You're not with the college team, but you go back with your junior team. And I went back and we were warming up, preparing to train. And that's when my ski popped off in the middle of a turn, just sort of a freak thing. And I don't remember anything after the ski popping off. I was conscious throughout, but I was in shock. So I don't remember what happened. And that's really when there was a big fork in the road.
And so you... At that point, Chris, things change. You wake up in a hospital bed, right? Like you don't remember anything.
So it was sort of like, it was like snapshots kind of thing. Like
Right.
I remember seeing my father looking down on me in the first hospital, and I thought, oh, I'm in big trouble. And then it kind of fades to black sort of thing. And I remember sort of going into, you get the CAT scan or the MRI or whatever it is, where you're kind of like the pizza, effectively, like getting put into the tube, and a little bit claustrophobic, and the nurse saying to me, don't fall asleep in there. And with the thing almost touching my nose and feeling claustrophobic, I fell asleep in there and got in trouble for falling asleep in there. So these are the things that I remember, but really I was kind of in and out, and it was a weird time too, just in that my accident was December 20th of 1988, and December 21st was Pan Am 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. So it's kind of one of those that my life has changed, and then you can't help but sort of hear the news where things are on, and there's this huge tragedy that has happened. And, it's kind of, those things are intertwined within my mind, but it's also just, I was kind of in and out of the whole thing. So I didn't know what was going on, really.
Well, yeah. So, but when they shared the news with you, what was that first reaction like?
So this is an interesting thing. So the doctor came out and talked to my parents, and my brother was there as well. They were in what they describe as a separate waiting room. And the doctor didn't have much of a bedside manner. He came in, he said, your brother's broken his back. He'll never walk again. And the guy turned and he left. And he didn't console them. He didn't educate them.
Just dropped that kind of news on them and just walked out.
And they were left to make sense of it on their own. And it was super emotional. And some of, we talk about resilience in some ways, and where do you get it?
Right.
Are you born with it or not? Is it modeled for you? And I think a lot of it is modeled in some ways. Because my father, they all cried, when they got this news. This was, in some ways you can't help but think, okay, your son's life is over, or life is over as he knew it, as we knew it. And they cried. And when they were done, my father said, that's the last time we can cry. Like, we have to be strong for Chris. And really interesting in that respect to sort of have that foresight and that sense of the strength that they had to bring, because I needed their help. And so that's really ultimately, like, looking at that time, the doctor told them, but they didn't want me to have the stigma of sort of this after school moment of like, hey, you'll never walk again. Your life has changed for the rest of your life. And they said, well, let's just let him figure it out. And obviously it's one of those things that, it's kind of, you figure it out. I knew something was wrong. I knew something was dramatically wrong, but I wasn't up against some big statement that was going to make my world or my mind smaller. And I felt like, you can call it denial, you can call it whatever you want. I felt like I was going to recover. And I think I have, but it wasn't exactly the way that I imagined it. Because initially it was kind of like the only way to recover is to walk out of there. You break your arm, you put it in a cast comes off, your arm is fine, right? This is doesn't really work that way with a spinal cord injury. And so for me, I looked at that and said, okay, I'm going to figure out how to get better. And so I wasn't stuck with the idea of like, there is no getting better.
So victim mindset never creeped in at any time. Or like the woe is me, like pity poor Chris. No. It was very much like, hey, this is my mission now.
Is to recover. And, and a lot of that I think was, life is tenuous at the moment. Right. You're in the hospital, right? You don't know what can go wrong, infections, et cetera, these kinds of things. But I felt like what I saw around me in the hospital was scary. I was in the trauma unit. And so it was scary. Everybody there had serious issues. And I felt like if I if I let myself lapse into feeling sorry for myself, that what I saw around me might be my life moving forward, that it was desperate. I had to bring my best self to this moment and try to be as powerful as I could. And I think oftentimes, I don't know about you, but I know growing up and probably since then as well, I've thought, there is a more powerful version of me. There's a more powerful
100%.
Version of myself that I haven't been able to access. Sometimes I feel like, sort of our power sometimes goes through this labyrinth of self-doubt and questioning and these kinds of things. And if it's a balloon of power, that by the time it goes through that, I can come out as this little puff of air kind of thing. And I felt like in the hospital, I didn't have the luxury of self-doubt. I didn't have the luxury of questioning myself, of insecurity. Really, it was a matter of just getting to work, and I had to be as powerful. And it was the most powerful that I've ever been. My life was black and white, right? And I think as human beings, we certainly have an attraction to that sense of black and white. We'd love things to be right or wrong. And the fact of the matter is there's a whole lot of gray area in our lives, right? I mean, it's not as simple and absolute as all of that. But for me in that moment, it was kind of like the black and white part of it was, I don't have the ability to do much physically, but I can give my body the best environment in which to heal. And that was remaining optimistic. That was remaining upbeat and happy, was going to give my body that best opportunity. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't, I wasn't in pity. I wasn't, those kinds of things I think could have drawn me down. And that's what I saw in that moment. I'd love to take credit for the decision that I made. In a lot of ways, it was just an instinctive decision of like, this is the best way to preserve my life.
Well, that's an apparent inflection point in one's life. And coming from a place where you're a competitive athlete, your identity's wrapped up in skiing. I've interviewed a ton of people. I have a lot of friends as well, especially in the special operations community, that struggle with transition. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we had Mark Green on, the author of Unsealed, and he wrote a book about dealing with life's transitions. You see that with not just the veteran community, you see it with also athletes, mm-hmm. and then you see it with folks that are retiring and they don't want to retire.
Yeah.
So did you ever have an identity like, holy cow, like I'm never going to ski again? Or was it like, hey, once I get out of this bed, my next micro goal is this? I mean, was it almost immediate when you said, this is now my life's mission and my life's purpose?
Yeah. So actually, when I was in the hospital, as a skier, I'd done a fair amount of mental imagery, right? I mean, you go and you imagine yourself doing what you do, skiing and doing it well. And you see that. And it's like training in a lot of ways, the mental imagery side of it. I did a fair amount of that while I was lying in that hospital bed. I believed, and part of this is not having somebody tell me, hey, you're paralyzed, you'll never walk again, that I was going to walk out of there. And I thought, okay, the end of the season, the race at Middlebury was always the final race of the carnival season. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to race, but maybe I could forerun it. Maybe I could be there and be part of the whole thing. And so I was training. I was training for that. I mean, it sounds a little bit crazy, but I was training for that next moment and that eventuality. I didn't know how I would do it. I'd never, like I said, I'd never seen anybody ski in a monoski. And I didn't know that I would ski in a monoski while I was in the hospital. But toward the end of my hospital stay, a friend asked me if I would be in the movie of a friend of a friend. So she was doing a documentary movie on adaptive skiing and needed a through story to be able to tell this story, and asked me if I would be that through story, if I would learn to ski on camera. And I said, okay, yeah, sure. I will definitely do it. In my mind, I was going to ski. I didn't know how I was going to ski, but I said yes. And so that was while I was still in the hospital. And then I was really lucky when I returned to school for the spring semester, did the spring semester, left for the summer, and actually finally got stronger and recovered in a lot of ways, but came back for the fall semester. And my college coach, a guy named Bart Bradford, called me and said, hey, come down to the office. I've got an idea. He had been out at Mount Hood, where a lot of national teams, junior teams trained during the summertime. And he had seen the adaptive team skiing. And actually one of his former athletes was one of the coaches at the time of the adaptive team. And so he saw them and talked to her and figured out, some of what was going on with the equipment, and said, hey, we want to get you a Monoski, which is about a $2,500 item then. Now you can spend $10,000 to $20,000. It's more expensive. And we want you to be part of the team. And I said, which was just amazingly
gracious.
How'd that
make you feel?
That was, one, it confirmed what I wanted to do. And two, it was just really cool because he didn't have to do that. Think about it. Like, there's a bit of a liability. It's not like I'm going to be good and when I first start out, but he felt like it was important for me, and it was important for the team, and he could extend that generosity to me. And so in that moment, I had a plan as far as the equipment that I would use, and I was going to have my own equipment, which is going to make it easier. Then I just had to figure out the whole learning to actually do it.
Yeah. So the path, like that path forward, or the process, you're used to the process, the training, you're in it with the team. What did that look like? Like the learning piece of it, was it incredibly difficult? I can only imagine.
So when I was growing up, one of my heroes was a guy named Ingemar Stenmark from Sweden. He was one of the greatest, second most wins in the World Cup now. Michaela Schifrin eclipsed him last year, I believe it was, and maybe the year before. Yeah, probably last year. I think it was last year. We'll call it last year. But part of his training was riding a unicycle.
Okay.
And so as a kid, we bought a unicycle, and my father and I had a bit of a bet, in terms of who could learn to do it first. And my father approached it with like ski poles and wanted to stay in balance the whole time. And my idea was, okay, I get up on this and I go as far as I can, as fast as I can, and ended up losing a lot of skin. But I ended up figuring out how to balance. And monoskiing was a similar kind of process where we went back to Mount Tom, where I'd grown up learning how to ski, and my father would kind of ski me he would take his boots off and hold onto the back of the seat and sort of ski me to a wide open place. And then it's like, all right, well, let's see what you can do. And so there were a lot of crashes, a lot of times that I thought, okay, well, let's see how we can do it. And I'd fall before I even got into the first turn, or before I even tried to do the first turn.
Do you remember your first crash? Do you remember one?
Oh, the first crash probably wasn't very exciting.
Right. I'm talking about the one, like, you're like, oh, okay.
The first good, solid crash was Christmas Eve. So the year before, I had my accident on the 20th of December. So as you might imagine, Christmas was affected. We would go to my father's parents, my paternal grandparents, for Christmas every year. They lived north of Boston. It was about 2 hours away. And we would ski half day on Christmas Eve. And then we'd go to, we get there and probably go directly to, the Christmas Eve mass kind of thing. And then we'd stay at my grandparents' house and we'd have Christmas, and then we'd leave the next day and come back. And usually there were ski races the day after, like the 26th, 27th, that kind of thing. So as you might imagine, Christmas, the 1988, the whole family went and stayed in a hotel and came to the hospital and all of this, and came to me because obviously I couldn't come to them. So this is Christmas Eve the following year. I have been skiing in a monoski for, let's call it a week or so, something like that. And I think I'm getting it. And we're just about ready to leave. This is the last run, and we're on a, moderate trail, nothing too steep or anything. And I'm skiing with my father. And I said, hey, just go down there and just watch. And I had been traversing across the mountain, making these big turns and trying to, keep the speed down. And I thought, I'm going to keep it in the fall line. I'm just going to make some real turns and go from one turn into the other and kind of have the rhythm of what's going on. And I went to make my first turn and nothing happened. And I start picking up a little bit of speed and I'm like, okay, like be cool. It's all good. And I went to make my second turn and nothing happened. And at this point, I feel like I'm going really fast. It might be that I wasn't going all that fast, but relatively speaking, I was flying. And I thought I've got to slough off a little speed here. So I kind of got the ski across the hill and tried to slough off a little speed, but I was flat. I wasn't on edge. My ski was flat and just sliding sideways across. And what's going to happen there is you're going to catch that outside edge and have that fly swatter kind of fall. And it was sort of fly swatter into a tumble just over and over and over again. And my father was down, 100 yards or something like that. And I kind of waved and said, hey, I'm okay, but come on up here and pick me up. And he came up and I'd kind of knocked myself in the face, had a little bit of a black eye, and showed up at Christmas Eve later that evening with a black eye. And my grandmother said to my father, why are you making him do this? And he said, it's not me. I'm helping. I'm supporting, I'm facilitating, but it's all his idea. And it really was all of my idea. And I was beaten up, but I went right back to it.
How long were you in the hospital?
I was in the hospital for 2 months, which was relatively short then. Now people are in the hospital for a couple of weeks, which I can't imagine how difficult that is to transition.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after 2 months, though, you're automatically going back into skiing. And it's like a year later, you're teaching yourself to monoski.
Yeah. It was 362 days, so 3 days short of a year.
That's incredible to me. And then from there, when did you basically say, all right, I'm going to do this thing and become a Paralympian?
I think as soon as I started, I started with the idea
that.
This is what I'm going to do. I had 15 years of ski racing experience, so I knew what I was supposed to do.
And if you don't mind me asking, just for ski racing, what specifically, being in Arkansas, as you can imagine, not a lot of skiing goes on here.
No, probably not.
But for that sport, what were you like? What was that was your thing, in the ski racing world? What was it?
What was my thing? So
your event, I guess, is the best way to ask.
I raced slalom and giant slalom growing up.
Okay.
I was a better slalom skier than I was a giant slalom skier. I like to say I was good enough to know that I wasn't great.
Gotcha.
And it's a sport like anything of potential, right? And I felt like in some ways coming back to skiing for me was an opportunity to realize my potential. Potential is something that can kind of keep you warm at night, right? You're like, oh, I've got a lot of potential. It's like, what if you never realize that potential? Is it just sort of a fantasy? And so I felt like I wanted to get back into skiing because I wanted to figure out how good I could be. And ski racing was a vehicle for that. Your fear is a huge part of the sport, right? It's going to meet you, whether it's fear of getting hurt, whether it's fear of embarrassment, those are real fears and sometimes hard to differentiate one from the other. And I felt like I'd succumbed to my fear in the past. And so not only was I coming back with sort of after having been hurt, with realizing that, hey, yeah, you really can get hurt and hurt pretty badly doing this. But I wanted to figure out who I was. And that's kind of where I was in my career beforehand. As a college skier, I wasn't heavily recruited or anything like that. I mean, I was there and thought, hey, I've got 4 years here to prove how good I can really be. And I want to figure out how I can get there, which is then going to prime me for whatever I'm going to do next. I mean, sport generally is a relatively short period of our lives, especially on the competitive side, right?
Yeah. So as you're walking into this new world or you're identifying hey, this is what I'm going to do. And was it going back to slalom, or was that an option, or was it just one of those things that?
No, I mean, I ended up racing all 4 events afterwards. And I started probably my first few races were more of a giant slalom. It was sort of an easier transition. It's kind of slalom is the most turns, which in some ways is the slowest event, but it's not necessarily the easiest event because sometimes it's just hard to make all of those turns, where giant slalom is hard to do really well, but is easier to transition to and not do all that badly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you start down this path now is a better way to put it. You start down this path. What did that look like? I mean, it had to scare the hell out of you and just say, you know what, is this even possible?
What was
the flood of emotions that you felt like when you just finally made that decision? Like, I'm going all in. This is what I'm going to do. Not knowing if it's possible or not. I'm certain that there was a ton of emotions that came with that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I like to say that skiing was representative of my recovery. If I could ski, then I'd recovered. But it was tied to my recovery in that sense, in that it was too big for me to understand. That I couldn't try it one day and say, that's not going to work. That it really was a commitment to keep doing it over and over again. And I think that by the time it felt like, so I started 89, 90, and by the winter of 92, 93 is when I actually felt like I was good. Mm. And that might have been the first time that I could look back and say, okay. And that's, like you talk about in the introduction, you're talking about Sarah, Will, and I had started a camp for other monoskiers. And she and I had our accidents 5 days apart and sort of rose to the top of the male and female monoski worlds together. And felt like we had both been skiers before and that other people might not be willing to go through the difficulty that we'd gone through. I mean, it was brutal. Like I remember I went back to my first ski camp with Middlebury, which was a Christmas camp. So I had a week or so under my belt and I could kind of ski from the top to the bottom. And I think the first run took me like most of the morning to get down. And I was absolutely just covered in snow and just wet and cold and all of that. And, I went back there for a reunion and all the guys who worked at the Snow Bowl, the Middlebury Snow Bowl, wanted to tell all the stories of all the crazy things, just from like having ice in the lift line and my outrigger sliding out and banging my head against the lift shack. And there was one double chair that I got onto and it had like a little metal piece right in the middle of the seat, which happened to be the exact width of the slats on my monoski. And so I slid right onto this thing, not knowing, and then went to get off the lift at the top, pushed off, and the seat came out behind me. So instead of coming off the lift, I was stuck to the lift, but I was upside down. And suddenly the lift was getting higher and higher. And I didn't know why I was still stuck to the lift. And eventually they kind of slowed it down and went around the bull wheel. And then on the other side, they kind of pushed me back up and helped me get off the lift and said, don't do that again. And, so these were some of the things that I did that weren't even like the crashes. My brother ended up going to school there afterwards. So he's 2 years, or maybe he was 3 years behind me at that point. And we were running giant slalom, and it was really bumpy and difficult that day. And the objective, sort of like life, the people who are sort of make the bumpiest terrain look smooth and easy and logical, like that's the objective. It might be bumpy, but you need to sort of ski it and absorb it and make it look smooth and make it look natural. And I was just getting tossed all over the place. And so I'm struggling every run, just trying to battle this whole thing, trying to make it look easy and making it look much more difficult than it should be. And right at the bottom, it flattened out a little bit, but I hit this bump right in between turns, and I got locked on the wrong edge. So I got locked on the edge that was taking me directly towards the woods. And at this point, your ultimate break is you fall, right? You want to, if you're going to slow down, if you want to stop, like fall over. And I was stuck on a turn and couldn't really fall over. So I'm trying desperately as I'm approaching the woods to fall over. And eventually I got to the point where I kind of tipped it over at least, and the ski hooked up and it made a turn and I went right back into the course. And so I thought I was going to end up in the woods. I ended up making a turn, came back into the woods, and we're watching this later on in video. And my brother says to me, he said, well, that's the best turn I've seen you make. And I was like, that was completely by accident, man.
Well, so as you are starting to find your rhythms, you had mentioned earlier when I was with you earlier that you had a goal to become like the fastest. Is that right? Like
I did, yeah.
Like what drove you to set that goal? Like,
well, big part of it was there were 3 classes of monoskiers, and it's based on ability. It's based on functional ability, right? So the muscles that we have, and so each vertebrae corresponds to a level of function, a level of sensation and movement effectively. So muscles that you can actually use. And I'm in the most disabled of the 3 categories. So my class was supposed to be the slowest of the 3. So I really, as I said, I've just the muscles underneath my sternum and sort of corresponding back muscles. The next class is the class that really is paralyzed from the waist down. So they have all of their effectively torso muscles. And the next class is a class that has some use of legs, some maybe double amputation or single amputation or something like that. But to the outside public, we're all in the same apparatus. So I didn't want it to be about, oh, well, that's good for you. That's good.
So you weren't looking at it like, hey, I'm level 3 or whatever.
Exactly.
I'm in this category. I'm going to be the fastest of this category. You said, no, I want to be the fastest in the world. Is that basically?
It was it. I'm not
going to let the label define me.
I didn't want the label to define me. I didn't want the disability to define me. And I wanted the general public to be able to appreciate it, to go, oh, you're fast. And that's it. Simple. You're fast. And, probably the greatest compliment that I've received in sport. We were training in Vail one day, and my coach there had skied on the World Cup, was a World Cup downhiller. And the Pro Tour was in town. And a bunch of these guys had skied on the World Cup as well. So they ended up training with us. And we were training, we were running a course, and I'm just waiting for my turn. This is what you do. You've done it throughout your whole life. You go and you wait for your turn and you go. And there's a Swedish guy behind me who was racing on the Pro Tour, formerly raced on the World Cup. And he said, I like your turns. And I was like,
how big of a boost was that?
I was like, it's exactly what you hope for, right? I like your turns.
But isn't it though powerful when something like that's unexpected happens? I mean, like, it's just like, man, all right, I can do this. Like he had noticed that. And that's something a lot of times that, to me, there's a tremendous amount of value that we all bring, but very few actually recognize it.
It's true. And especially to be recognized by your peers.
By effectively. Your peers.
Yeah. I mean, that's the stuff, like I read the, sports page or whatever. And when a teammate talks about another teammate in that kind of way, I mean, that's the stuff that brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, I looked at him and went, oh, well, thank you. I like your turns too.
But that just sets you on that path though, right? Like, talk about get into like what it took though to become the fastest in the world.
Yeah, I think what it took to become the fastest in the world was, one, it was tapping into the knowledge that I had before. And I think that some of that is I knew what it was supposed to feel like. So when I did it, I knew when I had done it. Another part of it is believing that I had a competitive advantage. I believed that what I had done before gave me a competitive advantage so that I should be successful. And I think that's something that is really helpful in finding a way to be successful in life is recognizing that you have a competitive advantage, believing that you have a competitive advantage. I mean, there should be a reason that I should win, because I think it's really easy to have reasons why we don't think we should win. And so that those two were really my knowledge, belief in the competitive advantage, and then sort of being willing to perfect the craft. And by perfecting the craft or attempt to perfect the craft, right? I mean, ski racers talk about the search for the perfect turn, like it's like a unicorn, right? I mean, it'll keep you coming back, but you never quite get there. But you hope that that's it. You keep pursuing it. And so the small things are the really important things, just doing the basics correctly and building that basic and building the technical base was really important for me. And then it was about stretching myself. One of the things that I was not supposed to do well was ski well when it was bumpy, when it was difficult, when the course had deteriorated. But technically, I did a lot with the technical side that allowed me to be comfortable, even though I didn't have the balance when it was really difficult. And so instead of having a disadvantage, I actually had an advantage when the course got more chewed up. And so it was about, it was really about, using that foundation from before, believing I had a competitive advantage and just working and building building into the sport, building my technical side and then stretching myself and finding a way to keep putting myself in positions that were uncomfortable. And I think the other part of it probably is the mental side and adopting a belief that I was on a journey and that I had to find a way to learn from the situations and learn from the situations in a way that the greatest challenges were the greatest opportunities for me to prove to myself, because ultimately it was me proving to myself that I could be successful and perform in that moment. And the more I could do that, the more I could believe that I could do that. So it made me search for more, but I think it was a matter of kind of being in the midst of it. I think in a lot of ways, it's kind of like being in the mud. And sometimes we want to think of ourselves, I want to think of myself as sort of being pristine and being above it all. And like, oh yeah, I can do this, and I just bring supreme talent to this, and it's all going to work. But this was saying, I'm just in the mud, and I'm just mucking it, in the muck, and I'm just a mucker, right? I mean, this is just one of those where you're just or a mudder, I guess, isn't that what the term is with the like with the horses, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're there and you're going to make it work. It might not be pretty, but you're going to find a way to keep getting a little bit better. And I think that's not looking at myself in too big a terms, but saying, just get in there and keep slugging it out.
Well, on this rise, like this meteoric, like just rise, I would say, of success, was there at any point where reality set in, like, hey, this is going to be harder than what I anticipated? Like, did you get your ass kicked and basically say, okay, all right, like, I'm going to take the medicine and I want to learn from this? Do any questions come up along the way saying, like, is this really worth me going through all this to become the fastest man in the world? I mean, there's got to be a point in time.
Oh, there were many, many points in time. And so I graduated in January of 92. And the games were in Albertville then. The Paralympics were in Albertville in March of 92. And I felt like I had a limited window in a lot of ways. Like this whole sport thing, like I need to get going and I need to get to the point
like
where I could be the best, because I was also, it was what I was doing as a career. So I had to figure out a way to support myself. And if I wasn't winning anything, and if I didn't get to the games, there wasn't going to be much support. And that year I went to our very first camp in November, and our head coach got on the lift with me and he said, "You're not going to make the games." He said, this is it. He said, they're combining, and I'd been winning my class, but they were combining classes. So instead of 3 classes of monoskiers, they had 2 classes of monoskiers. So guys from the class above me were going to come down. In the U.S., we had another 3 guys, 4 guys, possibly in that other class who were going to come down into my class and compete against me for 3 positions. And really, we were only going to be able to, we only had 9, I think there'd be 9 classes total. So really it was like you'd have 1 person per class who could start. And so you could start 2 in a class if you didn't start 1 in another class, kind of thing. So there was a little bit of a fudge factor on that. And he said, these guys are coming down, you're not going to make it. And I said to him, well, then if I don't make it, this is going to be it. Like, I'm going to have to go
did
start
he mean
my
like
career.
you're not going to make it? Like, meaning like, hey, man, you're cut? Or was it like when you go to try out, like the competition is too stiff? Sorry, Chris. Like,
yeah. The reality of the situation is it's not gonna work out. He wasn't telling me then that I was done. He said,
but how much more, like, to that point, you didn't believe in it, obviously.
No, I didn't. No,
you blocked him out.
Well, yeah, there was a part of it like, well, let me show you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Did it fuel you? Like, did you say, you know what? Okay, I want to torch you with my success.
That was the intention.
Was it a motivator for you?
That was most definitely the intention. But I was struggling through. I was doing it, and I was doing well in my class, and I'd knock off a few of those guys every once in a while, and I had some good races here and there, but certainly not the consistency to say, hey, I'm the best here.
Right.
I mean, it's that whole, Steve Martin kind of his quote of like, be so good that they can't afford to ignore you kind of thing. And I wasn't so good that they could afford to ignore me. And so I kept going. And Sarah Will, who was, 5'1", like she said 90 pounds. I might not believe her. She might not have quite been 90 pounds, but she was beating up on me too. We ended up dating at one point, and she was faster than I was, and all the guys were faster than I was, and so I'm just slugging it out and trying to figure out how I can get there. And I did get named to that team and to go to Albertville, and which was in some ways a surprise. I mean, I was on the fence whether it was going to work or not, and I got named to the team. And the guy who was the director of our team was a guy named Jack Benedict, who had lost both legs in Vietnam to a landmine, and then went back. He was the first guy to go back into active duty as a double amputee. So he went back into active duty. And Jack was as tough as it sounds. Just, he was just a tough dude.
Wait a minute. Like, he went back into active duty?
I mean, I don't think he went back into action, but he went back into active duty. But still,
he went back.
Yeah, exactly. So he went back. Yeah, he was back, and he was there, and he was
a real dude there.
He was a tough dude. He was a tough dude, and sort of he conducted his meeting sort of like Patton kind of thing. Like, you knew most definitely who was in charge. And I came into that meeting so it was you used to have team meetings, and then suddenly it's the smaller group that's actually going to the games to represent the games or represent the U.S. And we came in, and he said, "You are here to win medals." And for me, I think it was like a permission kind of thing. And I always had a bit of a challenge in the big moment. When all the lights came on, and that was I had a second chance after my accident. I was like, I'm going to prove that when the lights come on, I can really perform. And Jack said that, and he said, "You're here to win medals." And I skied the best that I'd ever skied during that period of time. I skied in the slalom and the giant slalom in Albertville, and I won 2 silver medals. None of the Americans who had beaten me all year ended up beating me. And so I was able, this Austrian guy beat me in both. And actually I beat him the first run of the giant slalom, and I hit some big bump and almost went out on the second run. And he ended up getting me by, I think, 1/10 of a second, might've been 2/10 of a second. And I was like, I was so close away from winning a gold in my first games. But really, yeah, I mean, it was a struggle, and it was one of those, I was like, I should be better than I am. And I really just wasn't. And it took me a long time to get there. So yeah, especially in my mind, a long time to get there.
When along the way did you say, hey, let me ask it this way. During that time period, Chris, can you recall a dark moment like that you had to really just gut it out?
A dark moment in that time, probably the most difficult one. I had a lot of trouble with the speed events, and especially early on. Eventually, eventually I did pretty well in the speed events, but Super G and downhill are considered the speed events. And so those are the faster of the two, downhill being the fastest of the events, the fewest number of turns. And there was a Super G at Winter Park, and I had to be 10 seconds out in this race or something like that. I mean, it was an eternity. I was not even in the race really. And I think that was probably, I mean, that was one of the darkest moments. And then I think when I talked to you guys earlier, I said that was 1992. So I'm still trying to make the team. And I demonstrated really that I was a beginner in that race as opposed to somebody worthy of making the team. And then the next year I went to a prosthetist and we built this seat. And I showed up and I built a seat that one sort of fit me perfectly kind of thing, but then also had a back on it and a strap around it that would sort of flex with me and would help me get back to neutral so that I wasn't just resting my chest on my knees, because that didn't work out when I hit a bump and I was in the air, because I'd start to tumble or start to flip really. And so the next year I went back and went to the first race, and I'd gone from, winning my class and sort of being on a rise to going completely backwards with this new seat. I couldn't ski to save my life. Everybody was beating me. Sarah and I were dating at the time. Sarah Will and I were dating at the time and living in Vail. And I said I was going to be the best in the world, but I wasn't even the best in my bedroom kind of thing. And she was beating up on most of the men in the world. And I was thinking, wow, I kind of wish I was as fast, at least as fast as she is. And I ended up having a sore as a result of this new seat. And yeah, I'm just lying around sort of feeling sorry for myself, thinking, okay, have I made a bad decision? Have I set a goal that's not?
What do you mean a sore? Like a sore from the seat? Like
so basically like a cut, but like a sore basically on my butt kind of thing, right, or on my on the back, like on my coccyx kind of thing, and that for somebody in a wheelchair is a big risk.
That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
So like pressure sores are something that you often hear about with people in wheelchairs, because you're sitting on your ischiums effectively, and the muscles have atrophied, so you don't have the support of the muscles. So it's pretty much bone on skin, and it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to break down that skin. And when that skin breaks down, it's really hard for it to recover. And oftentimes it doesn't really. So it's always prone to further sores. And sometimes, there are people who've definitely had to spend months lying on their stomach trying to get the sores to heal. And so if that's the case, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do with the rest of your life. You're sort of in a process of just trying to heal. So that was a bit scary, and really just kind of thinking, I'm not going in that direction. I'm not going in the direction where I'm getting better. I'm actually going in a direction where I'm getting worse, and I'm doing this full time. And if I'm not getting close, should I really continue to pursue it? And luckily I was able to kind of reconfigure a different seat and get something that really worked for me. And that set me on that path of continuing and actually sort of the transfer. It was probably the biggest transformational.
That was my next question.
That was the biggest transformational moment. I took the stock seat and kind of customized it for myself and built like a little bit of a spine out of like a polypropylene sheet kind of thing, like maybe 1/8 of an inch thick.
So you built it yourself?
Well, built is probably, that sounds more grandiose than it really was. I sort of trimmed this polypropylene sheet down to, 8 to 10 inches kind of thing. So it was sort of the width of my back or part of the width of my back, and put a kidney belt around it. So an elastic belt, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to give myself a little benefit of balance and benefit to be able to come back to center, right? I could kind of lean to the left and then come back to center, and the elastic would help me come back to center. But I didn't want to lock myself in, because one of the biggest things is separating the upper and lower body. And I'll try to explain this so it actually makes sense. So in some ways, skiing and maintaining contact and maintaining pressure on the snow is almost like if you're ever driving on snow or driving on ice or driving on mud. Since we're here in Arkansas, there might be more where the back end comes around and you steer into the turn. Mm-hmm. And your steering wheel is effectively your upper body when you're skiing. So you want to steer into the turn. So you're thinking that you're if you're turning right, that the steering wheel goes right. But when the back end comes around, the steering wheel has to go left, and that's what your upper body is doing. So you kind of have like where it goes into, it's almost like a V that you're creating out of the image of your lower body and your upper body. So your lower body is tilted into the right, but your upper body is tilted to the left, if that makes sense.
Does make sense.
You're pushing that pressure into the ski instead of the pressure into the hill, which if you're putting the pressure into the hill, then the tail of the ski is going to come out. This might be more technical than we anticipated, right?
No, like I'm visually seeing it in my mind, and I think that's the point too, like we talked about earlier. How many people did you say in the world? Was it 1.5 billion?
It's 1.2, 1.3 billion. Like 15% of the population has a physical disability. And one of the things you had mentioned earlier was, and it was a question by Dave. It was a great question. I guess that's why I keep asking it. It's like, what would you like to see more of from those that don't have a physical disability? And I think what you came back with was just curiosity. And it goes back to Mount Kilimanjaro and how that whole story started to unfold, right? Yeah. I mean, I think curiosity, it's one of those things that I think from the time we're little, we're taught not to stare at someone who looks different, right?
Yeah.
And as a result, there are a lot of people with disabilities who become effectively invisible because we're taught not to stare. And, I think that, and there are a lot of
I've never heard it put like that, but the way you put that, I mean, that's super impactful.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously I've been on the receiving end of that to a certain extent. But I think that the idea of curiosity is it's really easy to see each other for the differences that we have. But the curiosity, I mean, it's part of the reason you're doing this podcast, right? You're curious about how people do what they do and bringing people from a variety of different places. And
the amount of, like, for me with you and your story and the whole ethos and the why behind this podcast is I love celebrating the quiet, heroic moments of people's lives.
Yeah.
I think that's where we honestly grow the most. That's how resilience is born. You in a quiet, heroic moment, you're explaining this from a technical perspective. Like, I'm not a skier. I'm visually putting myself there, which creates the curiosity of the world that you live in. And what keeps coming back to my mind is like, you were able to figure a lot of things out along the way. Like, your greatest resource was really resourcefulness. You never looked at an obstacle and said, you know what, there's no way. And so you looked at this point, you said, okay, I want to reconfigure this seat. This is what I have in mind. And I bet you at that point, and you had said it earlier, is like, it was a transformational moment in your life, because I would imagine you felt probably maybe one with the ski. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. And it unlocked a whole different level for you that you honestly did not know was even there. So like even that is a quiet heroic moment because you never gave yourself an excuse to stop figuring things out. Like is that an accurate way to say it? And
no, I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's the human thing, right? And the thing is, it's not like it always happens in the moment, right? I mean, to maintain that sense of problem solving and like, okay, yeah, there's a solution. I mean, there are those moments where you go, okay, I'm completely overwhelmed. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to quit. And then you come back the next day and go, okay, well, let's look at this again and see if we can figure out how to make it work. And that to me those are the most successful people, right? I mean, I looked at growing up as a skier, there were so many times that you're racing somewhere and you think, oh, well, nobody's going to be able to do that well. That's impossible. The conditions have deteriorated. You're just going to get hurt. You're going to do this. And somebody goes and makes it look easy. And you go, oh, okay. Like there is that solution. And I think that that's something that's representative of what we experience in life too, that, we can look at a problem from one direction and go, okay, that doesn't seem like there's a solution. It doesn't seem like there's a solution. And then look at it from a different way, or somebody else is going to look at it from a different way. And we go, okay, oh, wow, it makes sense that way, which is the intriguing part. And I think the part of how we have to approach our lives. And so when I looked at the seat with Monoski and with putting the kidney belt on it, when I put the kidney belt on it, it was actually high enough on my body that I actually felt it. Prior to that, I had been skiing on a ski that I was paralyzed. All the parts of me that were in contact with the ski were paralyzed. So I didn't actually feel the ski. And
this helps you feel the ski.
So I actually felt the ski.
What was that feeling when you first got everything?
It felt easy.
Got everything situated. It felt easy.
It felt easy. It was like, wow, it moves with me.
Holy cow.
It's not like this totally foreign thing, which early on, I mean, for the first couple of years, it really felt foreign, and you kind of deal with that. You figure out how to deal with something that is foreign, but it didn't feel connected to me. And suddenly it felt connected to me, and it was almost like cheating. It was like, oh, wow, I can feel it. This is good. Okay. This is a good way to move forward. But I think that's, the more problems you solve, the more you think that you can solve other problems, but also the more you recognize. But it also, I don't know about you, but I mean, it's probably part of the reason that you're doing this is I'm greedy when it comes to heroes. Like I've had heroes, I collect heroes. I just do. Like I see people who do what I want to do, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be like that person. And you're the same way.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. I look at it as the greatest gift that we've all been given is the ability to learn from one another.
Yeah.
I mean, in the ability for me to pull from your story 1, 2, 3, 4 things that just really hit home for me in regards to, like, I go into 5th grade basketball practice at 5:00 right
Awesome.
after this, right?
Okay.
And you've got 5th grade boys who have really bought into the system, to the ethos that I teach. And, but it gives me it sets just a different tone for me to even walk into the 5th grade basketball practice versus saying, I've got an hour and a half with these boys. No, it's sitting down with someone like you provides me different perspective and allows me to teach, coach, really, and expand your impact through them, right? Like so yes, I'm greedy with heroes, but I believe that, and you can agree with this, that it's the who that makes up all the how. Like you're not ever you said it earlier, even as you went through, that time in your life when you were paralyzed, it's like, look, your parents cried and that was it. So they modeled resilience, but they also modeled for you growing up, like movement's medicine. So you never stop moving, where most people, unfortunately, they run up against something like that in life, it's over. Like for a lot of them, they struggle to find anything that really is going to get them to another level. And so anyway, but yes, I'm a lot like you in that regard.
But it's interesting you talk about the 5th grade basketball as well, in that it holds you to a higher standard
100%.
as well, right? I mean, this is part of being a basketball coach, being a father, is that you want to model the person that you want to be, so that your athletes and your children can follow behind you as well, you know. So it's kind of interesting how that all works, because you're setting a standard for them, but at the same time, by setting that standard, you're holding yourself to that standard.
Absolutely.
Too.
It's about putting yourself in those environments to do so. Well, and two, like, to the 5th grade boys, I also want them to see that you can be 41 years young or you can be 41 years old. It is a choice.
Yeah.
Right? You can either be at the bottom of the hill or you can be over the hill. And those are things that we talk about, right? Like, I never want anybody to ever stop growing, which is kind of back to your story. So after you really unlock the code with your ski, did that just send you on a run when it comes to like your career as a Paralympian?
It really did. So I had that goal of being the best in the world, and the first time I kind of realized that I might be able to do it, and this is unfortunate for Sarah, in the sense that I ended up, she came back, she was away for a couple of weeks while this transformation happened. She was coaching up in Alaska, and she came back, and we went to a town race. So it was just kind of a local race, but it was a fairly serious race. It was on a good hill and stuff like that, and I beat her, and I hadn't beaten her. And I beat her. So this is one of those things where it's like, you know, my 5'1", 90-pound girlfriend, you know, like I was celebrating, but she beat the vast majority of the men in the world. And I thought, well, if I can beat her, then I might have a chance of beating everyone.
Yeah, and becoming the best in the world.
In the world, and which was also a celebration of who she was. That
Absolutely.
You know, she was right there as well, and so she was a good barometer of where I could get in the world, and so that happened probably within that next week. And then we went to a race, and I knocked off the guy who had been the best in the world. And so, you know, just in one run of one race, but at the same time, it was like, okay, well, that's building toward the next one and the next one. And that's where she and I kind of went on parallel paths, and she did the same thing on the women's side, but also beaten up on a whole lot of there'd be a whole lot of the men that you could talk to from that era who go, she beat me all the time.
She was a badass.
Yeah, exactly.
When did Mount Kilimanjaro come into play? Like, when was that seed planted?
So I retired from competitive sport after the games in Athens. So I did both alpine skiing, and I raced wheelchairs on the track. And so I raced.
Oh, so you raced wheelchairs on the track?
I did, yeah. So 100, 200, 400, and 800, and the relays.
Did you win any medals?
I did. I won a silver medal in the 200 meters in Sydney. So I was second in the 200 meters, and I won a gold, a silver, and a bronze in the world championships as well in track. So,
that's incredible.
So yes, I had a little bit in there. It wasn't nearly as good,
just a quick stopping point there, though. Like, how hard was the training? Like, when you went from skiing to that, like, what did the training look like?
It was similar but different. You know, I think that wheelchair racing helped me with skiing because I was coming into the season fit, where skiing didn't really help me with wheelchair racing, asking. Where I was significantly behind my competitors, and kind of had to catch up quickly in order to be successful. But luckily, I don't know, things happen relatively well, especially when you're younger, that I could pick it up relatively quickly. And I was pretty good at accelerating. I wasn't great at starting, and I was okay at sort of top speed, but I was pretty good at accelerating. So I did relatively well. And kind of like the 200 was really probably my best event, but you know, I think I was third in the world championships in the 400 as well. And so I was okay here and there. But yeah, it was a matter of, I was playing catch up and trying to train throughout the winter for the summer. And the summer prepared me much more for the winter than the winter prepared me for summer.
So when you retired from sport, though, that was
2004.
That was 2004.
And so we ended up climbing Kilimanjaro in 2009.
So this is 5 years is after you retired is when you actually summited
when
Kilimanjaro.
I actually summited. And I think it was 2008 that we did a training climb effectively. So we went to Kilimanjaro and did a climb, which I thought, this is sometimes your goals get in your way as well, right? I thought, well, we're here. It's going to be a whole lot cheaper if we just, if we just do it now. We'll just knock it out now. And
I've been there.
And I think it took me, what did it take me? It took me 3 days to get to the end of the first day, I think, is really, like where we were supposed to get the first day. I think it took me 3 days to get there. So when we did that training climb. So it nothing was happening quickly.
Where did the seed start though? Like where did you like, you know what? All right, I'm going to convert the impossible to possible. Like Kilimanjaro, like, yes, we're going for it. Like, where the hell were you when that thought popped in your head?
So I was trying
why?
Yeah, why exactly? I was trying to think, okay, so maybe I'll frame this with why to start off with.
Yeah, let's do that.
When I was competing, I felt like I was in a position where I could stretch people's imagination. The definition of disability is really less, right? I mean, that's the issue. And I wanted it to be about the human journey. I wanted it to be about what humans can do. The underdogs are our favorite 100%. Victors, right? I mean, this is what you're looking for, and I think we're all the underdog, really.
I would agree.
And so I felt like I had a platform when I was competing. I had an opportunity to stretch people's imagination about what was possible, and to see me and to see those 1.2, 1.3 billion people in the world differently, and not see for what happened, but see for that potential. How are you going to surprise me, kind of thing, which seems like a way we should sort of approach a lot of people, right? Or approach all the people in our lives. And
that's a great question. How are you going to surprise me?
Yeah, exactly.
In the most positive way. Yeah.
And I think if we're open to that, we'll see a whole lot more of it. But if we're close to it, we often see what we think we saw already. And so competing afforded me that opportunity to stretch people's imagination. When I retired, I lost it. I didn't have a platform to affect that greater perception.
Did you feel lost at any time?
I felt entirely lost.
Yeah.
I felt like it's kind of like you lose your relevancy as well. I was competing and I was relevant, and the phone rang, and this kind of thing, and I quit. Retired. I didn't quit, and phone didn't ring anymore. And you feel like you've.
That's what we were talking about earlier. It's just like that transition in life where, and this is what someone asked me this the other day. They're like, Cole, how do you set goals? And I said, look, that's a very deep question in my book. It's a very deep question. And I said, there's a reason why people don't achieve goals. It's because they're focusing on the achieve part of the formula. I said, a goal should always be about someone's personal philosophy. Mm-hmm. And to me, everything is built around identity.
Yeah.
Right. Psychology tells us that.
Reinforcing who you are.
Reinforcing who you are. What's your value system? But also I said, the key thing that people forget, kind of going back to your story, and this is a great play out of the Resilience Playbook, is it's about who are you looking to become through the process?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the absolute key. I said, show me somebody that if I ask you, like, okay, this is what I'm looking to accomplish, I want to say, okay, who are you looking to become through that process? And if they can't give you an answer, I guarantee you that goal that they say is not going to be something that they achieve, because it'll be start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. But what happens a ton, as you've experienced, like we talked about earlier, you have these life transitions that people just get lost too, and they forget who they are becoming. Mm-hmm. Right? So like the phone quit ringing for you.
Yeah.
And then there had to be at some point, it's like, okay, what's my next mission? Because I got to fire up the engines again.
It really was. And just being in neutral was the issue of just, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah, I was scared because I think the greatest thing that I'd experienced in life was sort of the passion to get better every day,
Mm-hmm.
and to improve myself and to find a way to get better and live that, and like the pain is part of it, but the pain is oftentimes an indication that you're doing something right. And I wasn't doing that. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know which direction I was going. I didn't know who I was. It was a big challenge. And I think that having a goal bigger than me myself was something that was important. And that's where Kilimanjaro came in, because it was an opportunity to make a statement. I've been lucky enough, to have some success in my life. I'd achieved some success. I'd achieved some notoriety in some ways, some visibility, which a lot of people didn't. And it was a way to help shape that narrative and tell the story. And when I decided to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I said, we have to tell the story, because if we don't tell the story, it didn't happen.
Mm.
And
I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big part of what we're doing right here,
Right.
is telling that story. And so, but for me, it gave me a purpose, a physical purpose. I had to train in order to get up the mountain. That was
how tall is Kilimanjaro?
19,340 feet. I went from 6 to 10 hours a day of just pedaling. We estimated 528,000 revolutions of my pedals to make it up there. A lot of little things.
How many calories were you burning a day? Do you even know?
I don't know for sure how many calories. I mean, it was 10,000 or more a day.
That's hard for me to wrap my mind around.
On the upper mountain. Yeah. I had to go to a black tie event on the way home and put on my tux. And I looked like a little kid wearing my father's tuxedo kind of thing, Yeah, that's the way it looked. I'd lost
But think about this. You go to the black tie event after you get home, when you get home, right? Like
Right.
after you accomplish this amazing feat, like you're in this room with a ton of people, and it's very hard to explain, like, hey, where you been, Chris? Listen, man, I just summited Mount Kilimanjaro. It's hard for someone to wrap their mind around, like, this guy's just summited Mount Kilimanjaro.
I think so. I mean, I think that's the way, ultimately that these kinds of things go, I guess, right? I mean, it's if you're involved in it, you understand how it all works. And that event, was an event for the Miami Project, and there were a bunch of sports heroes who were there, the professional athletes and all this stuff. And so in some ways it's where you can't understand what somebody else has done, because you haven't done it yourself, but at the same time, you completely respect what they've done because you understand how hard it was to do what they've done. And I think that's kind of the cool part, because I often think, so we cut ourselves off by saying that we don't understand. I could never understand what you've gone through. And it's like, well, we as human beings,
that's a good point,
experience a lot of things, and I think we have to be able to relate. I think we're saying that out of deference and respect and being polite and whatnot, but I think we also want to understand. And say, oh, I see what you're doing. I haven't experienced exactly the same thing, but I kind of understand, because I've gone through
my own Mount
things.
Kilimanjaro points in my life.
Yeah.
You had a profound story about a 6-year-old girl earlier that you had told that I would love for you to because this is a part of the Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, it's when I decided to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
That was like, okay, we're doing it. Like, tell that story real quick.
Yeah, so I decided, fully committed myself to climbing Kilimanjaro when I was in Tibet. I went with some friends who did a lot of philanthropic work over there, and they wanted me to come over. And in a lot of ways, I was an example over there. This is sort of the cycle of life kind of thing, or having multiple lives kind of thing. And somebody with a disability in some ways over there is like, oh, you've done something profoundly wrong, the whole karmic kind of thing. And they wanted to demonstrate that, no, it's not doing something wrong. It's really, you are, it's something that's happened and you continue your live your life fully. And so I was a bit of an example on this trip, but I also decided I was going to climb Kilimanjaro. And on the way home, long trip, had to drive 16 hours over bumpy dirt roads just to get into China, then flew halfway across the world. And when I went home, I wanted to, see what I missed. So I drove to see what my mail was, went to my mailbox and parked my car, started pulling my chair out and, put the back seat, the seat of the driver's seat all the way back. This is how I get my chair out of my car. My chair, the frame sits in the back passenger seat. So I had to grab the frame and I pull it over me and then grab a wheel and put one wheel on. It's really relatively easy. There's a button in the middle of the hub that I can push that has a little ball joint that releases and you can just push the axle right in, so I don't have to do any wrenches or anything. So I'm doing this, and in the process of doing this little girl, probably about 6 years old, rode up and she said, "Well, what happened to your legs?" And it's just which in some ways is an impolite question, but it also is.
She's curious.
It's curious, exactly. I mean, it's one of those.
She's a 6-year-old unfiltered child that has just basically is going to say what's on her mind.
She's not bound by political correctness,
right?
The way that adults are. That'd be an impolite thing to say. She's like, I want to know. Tell me what's going on, and I really didn't feel like having the conversation. I just flown halfway across the world, but at the same time, from the time we're little, we're taught not to stare at someone who looks different, right? It's impolite to stare. And, I felt like I had to answer her question as best I could. And I told her I was a ski racer and that I had a skiing accident. My ski popped off and I broke 2 vertebrae. And I tried to describe, what happened in a way that she might be able to understand. I said, those little bumps on your back, well, those are bones that protect the nerves. The nerves go in between those bones and they bring the message from the brain to the rest of the body. And because I broke 2 of those bones, it's like cutting a power cord. So the message doesn't go from my brain to my legs or my legs back. And I didn't know how well I was doing, but apparently I was doing pretty well. She said, "So you'll never walk again?" I said, "No, probably not." And she rode away. And as she rode away, she said, "Well, that's too bad." And I wish that I'd stopped her, because if I'd never had my accident, I never would have become the best in the world at anything. I became the best monoskier in the world, but it wouldn't have happened. And it's hard to see that potential gift coming out of something that can be perceived as so tragic,
Yeah, and then so after your encounter with her, obviously the seed had been planted. You went through some relentless training to get to Mount Kilimanjaro. So the first day, you're at the base. Kind of walk us through just, it had to be a spiritual experience, just the whole thing. I mean, and just hearing some of the stories around your training and the trial and error, of course, the shortcomings that come along with that, because you retired in 2004, right?
Or 2004, exactly. Yeah.
So then 2009, we're summiting Kilimanjaro,
right,
for a bigger reason than yourself. But between 04, 09, like we've talked about, there's a lot that happens, and the training is incredibly important to get you even to the base of Kilimanjaro. And I would imagine there is no turning back. Like, there are no redos. This is how we're going to do it, guys. Like, this is it. But like anything, like Mike Tyson says, you always have a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So walk me through. I really love stories like this, because to me, this is a powerful moment that we need to unpack.
Yeah, the plan. I mean, it's amazing how many other things went on with it too, right? So I was a alpine skier and I raced wheelchairs on the track. I did individual sports.
Right.
I was a lone wolf. I mean, I was part of a team.
You never operated in really a team setting to where you had to lean on somebody else. I mean, you were spotlights on Chris when the clock starts. It's Chris versus Chris, and of course anybody else that you're competing against.
I mean, I had teammates,
right?
And we were on the same team, and I had coaches, and so I wasn't entirely alone. But when the gun goes off, or when you go through the starting wand, it's all you.
Right.
You are, and so it's all about your performance. And so effectively I was a lone wolf, and in starting the Kilimanjaro thing, I was part of a team. And it was not just a team. It was like I was in charge of a team. So I was in charge of creating that team. I was in charge of, helping to lead other people. And that was a challenge in and of itself, where you have an idea of what you want to do, but at the same time, you got to figure out how to help other people be successful in their jobs as well. And so that was a big challenge for me. I never thought that I was really that person. And the training was really more of a callousing effect. I mean, I went from not doing a big international competition that lasted longer than 2 minutes to riding for 6 to 10 hours a day, where I could stop anytime I wanted. I just had to get going again and had to reach that point. And so that was a big challenge of just like thinking of how do I keep my mind engaged? How do I maximize? Like my arms were an inch smaller in circumference than they were. I had to measure my arms for some compression clothing that I was wearing, and they were an inch smaller in in circumference than they had been when I was racing wheelchairs. And so this was a physical change that had to happen, because it wasn't about just muscling the situation. It wasn't the anaerobic side. It was the aerobic side. I had to turn myself into an engine. And the pedaling was just maintaining RPMs. So if I was going over a rock, it wasn't like I could kind of just muscle my way and just go boom, 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 boom. It was really like I had to look at it and just roll over the rock. I had to maintain the RPMs so that I could just roll over this rock, and so that I'd sort of maintain a similar kind of cadence and pace, even though there was an obstacle in my way, because then I'm working on the cardiovascular system, the lungs, heart and lungs, as opposed to, or the aerobic system as opposed to the anaerobic system, because the anaerobic system, and once you exhaust it, you're not bringing it back. So that was a big transformation. And in a lot of ways, it was a transformation from like the naivete of youth to being more of an adult, in recognizing that there are going to be changes throughout this, and unexpected occurrences all the time, and that's part of going through. And it's just also the biggest victory in a lot of ways is kind of showing up prepared every day. Showing up prepared and just getting the job done and getting a little bit better, as opposed to feeling like you are completely in charge, and creating this transformation, right? And being in charge, you're like, okay, I can muscle through, and I'm autonomous. I can create. I can affect the change that I need to do. It's sort of like being in a race and like closing the gap to someone and saying, okay, I can close that gap right now, as opposed to saying, I'm going to keep in my race and I'm going to up the cadence, just a little bit or whatever. And I'm going to close that gap sort of incrementally, and having a more of a long-term kind of play on what's happening, as opposed to that short term of like, I see a problem, I'm going to fix it right now. It's like, I see a problem, I'm going to address it and start reeling it in, but I know that I'm not going to be able to do it immediately. So you don't get that immediate gratification of like, okay, I did it, and now I move on to the next thing. It's like, nope, doing it is being invested, showing up every day, and getting a little bit better and getting a little bit closer to that goal. And to me, that felt like more of an endurance kind of pursuit than the sprinter that I'd always been, where I felt like as a sprinter, I was willing to hurt enough that sometimes my hair hurt, my teeth hurt or whatever, but I knew there was a finish line. I could stop. This This is knowing that there's no finish line. This is the acceptance of no finish line.
Yeah. And so the training obviously changed you, and you go through this transformational process, but then comes the mountain. The mountain's the mountain. It's not moving. Weather doesn't matter how bad it gets. The mountain's the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have this incredible team. Y'all fostered, I'm certain, just amazing chemistry. You start off, like, take us through, like, kind of day one. How long did it take to summit, first and foremost, Mount Kilimanjaro?
Took 6.5 days up and a day and a half down.
6.5 days up and a day and a half day. So I'm sure you were excited in the beginning. Was there, like, at a point where you had, like, a messy middle, like, to where it was just a really rough spot, to where it's like, man, I don't know if this thing's actually going to get done?
Every day there was something, right? So you start at the gate, and that's about 6,000 feet. So it's 13,000 feet or whatever, and it's actually sort of more than from base camp to the top of Everest. I mean, granted, base camp is also really high, right? I mean, obviously really high, and so just getting to base camp is
because altitude really messes with a lot of people. You don't know how some people are going to react to altitude.
You don't know what it's going to do. Yeah, I think it's 48% of the oxygen at sea level when you get to 19,340 feet.
At that point, have you even been up that high, 19,000?
I've never. I mean, in an airplane, but that's an entirely different deal, right?
Because you had. Tried to go previously to do a trial run.
Yep.
You've done some 14ers. And I think we made it up to Williams Point, which is 5,000 meters. I'm trying to think of what that is as far as feet is concerned. I think it's like 17,000 feet, like in and around that area, is kind of what we made it to before. And that was with a bunch of assistants too, right? I was not doing it completely on my own. And so the first day, left the gate and went up, and the relatively easy part is the first part was for me. We were on what's called the Porter's Road, and it's basically just a dirt road. And so I made the first 2,000 feet of vertical. I did the first 2,000 feet of vertical in around 2 hours. I think it was a little under 2 hours, which is trekking pace. But then it got technical after that. And so then there are all sorts of rocks in the path, and they call them like little baby heads. It looks like baby heads in the path. And yeah, I mean, it's really graphic, but at the same time, it's when you think, you're like, okay, that seems appropriate. Like that's what they look like here. And so that got much more technical for me. You'd step over it, but I'm like a trials rider kind of thing, trying to find my way through. The winch didn't work. We put a sailing winch on the front of the vehicle. At lunch, did y'all have a contingency plan if the winch didn't work, or was it one of those things that was created in the moment?
Well, we had these boards that we had used before, so 8-foot long 2x8 boards that we could use to sort of bridge gaps, and so I could maintain traction and keep going. So we had those. The porters would kind of place those boards down, and I'd ride the 8 feet, and then they'd put another one down, and we'd ride the 8 feet, and then the guys in the back would grab the first one and put it back up in front. And so it was sort of this train of things, but things you don't even realize, like lunchtime in between, after I'd done those 2,000 feet of vertical, there were all these insects, and I ended up getting all these bites that were like silver dollar size, and you're kind of thinking, oh no, like malaria is an issue here. Is this malaria? Is not, it wasn't mosquitoes. I didn't get malaria, but
thank God.
Yeah, they were still itchy,
right.
But I didn't get malaria, so that was a good thing. That first day we finished in 6.5 hours. The next day, you got up early, and you're 3 degrees south of the equator. I mean, pretty amazing. 3 degrees south of the equator with snow on the top of the mountain.
Yeah, that's wild.
Just mind-boggling that way.
A lot of microclimates along the way, I would assume.
You start in a rainforest, you go through the heathers, the moors, the high desert, and finish on an Arctic climate zone on the top on the glacier.
Sounds like a badass adventure to me.
And so, yeah. And I mean, there were things, I mean, yeah, I mean, the spiritual part that you were talking about, like you leave the rainforest, and it was like leaving the door from the studio here. It was like, there were trees right across, all the rainforest, and one step you're in the rainforest, the next step you're out. I mean, it's hard not to perceive that as some sort of birthing kind of thing,
right,
or something like that. You're like, wow, okay, I have emerged, and now I can see all around me where I was surrounded by stuff. In the past, they didn't get their rainy season that year, so it was super, super, super dry. People would take a step, and it was just this exploding dust, which I'm on a lower level. Like, I'm basically on dust level, so I was in the exhaust of anybody's steps. So I'm just covered in dirt and dust. That day took 10 hours. Finished in the dark, started in the daylight and finished in the dark. We didn't think we'd make it to camp, and just kept plugging away. And Dave said to me,
you're hand cranking.
Hand cranking, yeah. So it's a bicycle that I'm pedaling with my hands.
So you're hand cranking up a 19,000 foot plus one of the tallest mountains in the world.
Tallest mountain in Africa. Yeah.
Tallest mountain in Africa. Yep. What's it called? What's his name?
The Roof of Africa.
The Roof of Africa. That's right. Just clipping away. Winch isn't working. You're using boards because obviously with the terrain to get you.
Yeah. Yeah. To kind of
like when you're cranking, you're in that moment. Like, what are you saying to yourself? What's going through your mind?
The funny thing is, oftentimes I think, like, some of these endurance events, it's almost like the opposite of REM sleep, right? Where you're asleep, your body's asleep, but your mind is active in REM sleep. I think that endurance is often the opposite, where sometimes your body is moving and you pass up part of your route and go, oh, I'm here already. I don't know exactly how I got here. Like, my mind shut off for a period of time, especially when you're fit. It seems like it can happen that way. My mind never did that. I felt like I was problem solving in like 18-inch increments. I was in the churn the whole time because I had to get from here to there, and there was never an easy way to get from there to there.
You've probably said this. It's like, how many miles is that up?
I think it was 30-ish or so, something around that.
And so 6 hours a day, 10 hours a day. How many miles were you clipping a day?
So we were doing, so the first 3 days, it was 15K, like 9.3 miles, in and around, plus or minus a little bit. So it's 27 miles up to Kibo, and then it's another 3.1 miles up to the top of Uhuru, which is the actual peak. So it's 30 miles and, 30 miles and change, 30, 33, something like that, maybe.
And so you're hand cranking, and then you get, let's just say, to the 3 mile marker, or like you're 3 miles to the summit.
Right.
Did you run into anything along the way because you hadn't been up the mountain before, obviously, and I'm certain you can go to Google Earth and look at it, but it's still not going to be the same as if when you're on the side of the mountain. Did you run into anything that said, we've made it this far, we're almost there? It's one of the, you talked about it earlier, and you're going to answer this question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Did you experience any false summits?
Any false summits necessarily? No, I mean, I knew that there was more to go. I didn't know all of the upper mountain. So when we went over on the scouting mission, I saw up to, about 17,000 feet or something like that. 17,000 to 19,340, the math's relatively easy, right? So that's 2,340 feet of the highest and most challenging terrain on the mountain. And so one, there was a scree field, which we didn't know exactly on the last day. So it was the steepest, it's the cone of the volcano. And it's basically like, it seems it's a steep angle, and it's covered in pea gravel, effectively, like 10 inches of pea gravel. So, it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's scree, right? So it's former volcanic, or it's volcanic ash or volcanic rock that's in the form of like gravel kind of thing. So you just sink down into it like a bunch of the trekkers are. emptying their shoes out of of gravel and dirt and everything like that. So that was definitely a challenge for me. That's where we needed the winch. But the biggest challenge was a boulder field right below Gilman's Point, which is really the crater, getting to the crater rim. And I couldn't get over these boulders. I mean, it was boulders that were, that there would be a bit of a scramble. It's not necessarily climbing a face, but it would be a scramble for any of the trekkers. And I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen the boulder field. So I didn't know if I'd be able to do it. I didn't know. A
massive boulder field. You're staring at a massive boulder field.
Massive boulder field, and that's the.
Did
part
it piss you off?
Obviously from my team, I knew that there was a boulder field. So they had told me about the boulder field, and
did they question that? Hey, look, we've made it this far. This isn't happening the rest of the way.
Dave Penny, who is my guide, is a guy who's climbed a lot of mountains, and his thinking is that you climb mountains in a variety of different ways, and so if you have to mark this part as being assisted on some level, then you're still getting to the top, right? And you mark that part and you move forward. This is some of the evolution, I think, for me too, was that the only way to be successful in my mind was to be the first unassisted paraplegic to make it to the summit of Kilimanjaro. And if they carried me up this boulder field, which is really 100 vertical feet of the 13,000 feet that we climb, it was, to me, that was still 100 feet. That was failure in that moment. And so that was the big challenge, was trying to see that in the way that, that it really was. And the funny part was that, like, my director on the film saw this moment and said, okay, now I have a film. Whereas if I'd just kind of gone from the bottom to the top and sort of rung the bell and called it good, then it really wouldn't have been very exciting. But this was ultimately the conflict. And, the idea that I climbed the mountain alone, even if I had gone from the bottom to the top without any sort of, without them carrying me, would have been a bit of a fantasy as well, right? I mean, it's like I had so much help along the way. I mean, I had people carrying my gear. We had people making the meals. We had, all this stuff. I wasn't.
You were the athlete. You were executing.
I was executing, but I wasn't doing it by myself. I was part of a team, and so that was the biggest. Would you
say that was a quiet, heroic moment to where you finally surrendered to the fact that, like, the boulders are here. I'm going to need a little help for us to be able to finish the mission, because it's not only incredibly important to me, but it's very important to all these people that have helped me get to this place.
Yes. I think it really was. I mean, the sort of giving over to that moment really was, and giving over to the team, and staying true to the mission of making it to the top was something that really was very important, and gained more significance in my mind with time, because in the moment, my view of success was really myopic, and it was failure in that moment of, like, okay, I got carried. So I failed in my pursuit of this goal and the objective and the greater job that we're trying to achieve.
And it's powerful. Like, I think it goes back to the difference. There's a different definition for resilience, right? People think of resilience a lot of times with the grit that comes with it. Obviously, that's a part of it. The bounce back, the comeback. We all love an underdog. But it's that tiny moment there to where you surrender to say, you know what? We're going to accomplish this mission together. It's not going to stain what we have done. It's not going to take away from anything that we have done. And what this really means, because I'm certain that you probably went back to the 1.2, 1.3 billion people that you're providing hope to, right? Like that, at that point in time, it's like, listen, this isn't about Chris. This is about a bigger mission at hand. So even making that decision, that micro decision, is what also forges resilience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's the human part. We're going to struggle as humans, and it's the vulnerability, right? I think which is the biggest challenge for us as humans, and it's also our biggest strength in a lot of ways. I mean, that sense of vulnerability.
There's a dichotomy
is what we
to
protect.
it, for sure.
Yeah, no, it really is. And so I think that hopefully I'm making a statement, creating a story that travels a bit, that affects the lives of those 1.2, 1.3 billion people, but also a story that ultimately, I mean, my goal in the whole thing is to be human, right? I mean, to not be separate from this whole journey that everybody else is on, and to recognize that, hey, yeah, we've got to learn from each other. We've got to find ways to demonstrate what it means to be human, because the stories are how we understand our lives and our place in our lives.
Man, so powerful. Your story is so powerful. I could sit in the studio all day with you, man. As we come to a close, how would you define resilience?
Resilience to me is, it's funny because I think that I saw it in my parents, really, in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The sense of resilience, because I always thought that, yeah, it was the grit, and it was the things that are going to go wrong. Sorry.
You need some water?
No, I should be okay. I'll make it through here.
I've asked, we've waited till the end for me to offer you water.
Yeah, there you go. Fair enough. But no, I saw the sense of resilience in my parents when I was in the hospital, in that I'd always felt like it was, you could dig down deeper and you could do more. And it was about what you could do. And we were in a position where we didn't understand where we were. Like the accident happened.
Yeah.
And it's such a big and profound change that you don't know what it means. But they demonstrated resilience to me in the sense of like, well, whatever comes our way is what we're going to handle. We can handle it. We don't know where it's going. We don't know what we're going to have to do, but we know we're going to do it. And that to me is really that sense of resilience, of allowing yourself to be in the unknown and saying, yeah, whatever I confront, that's what I'm going to.
Incredible definition of resilience. What an incredible, because think about if they did the opposite.
Yeah.
What if they freaked out?
Completely. Yeah. And then I'm taking care of them as opposed to them helping me. Yeah.
Just an incredible definition. Well, where can everybody find you? Like, you got 2 books. You got a phenomenal foundation. Of course, I read at the top of the show your introduction on your website, chriswaddellinc.com.
Yep.
And tell us more, because you've got such an incredible story to tell and so many lives to impact along the way. I mean, this is really the short version of it, but come on, man. Tell us where we can connect with Chris.
Yeah. So chriswaddellinc.com is a great place to connect with me. And you can leave an email there or send an email there. onerevolution.org is the website of my foundation. So ONErevolution.org. And then, Chris Waddell Living It is my handle, on Facebook and on Instagram. I really don't do a lot of Twitter, so I'm not big on the tweets, or X, I guess is what it's called now. Whichever it is, I don't do that much of it. Now I just missed the boat.
I don't either. I missed the boat
on it. So, but those are the best places you can buy my book on Chris Waddell Inc. So Things I Want to Remember Not to Forget. Which
what's the book about? Like,
it's a series. So it's not the transcript from my graduation speech, but it's a series of anecdotes that are, things I want to remember not to forget. I don't know about you, but there have been a lot of times in my life that I've done something or learned something, and then I've come back and had to learn it again. And I went, haven't I already done this before? Shouldn't I have learned it once? And, I don't know about the rest of you, but there are times we end up learning things again. So
true.
It's a reminder.
So true.
Yeah.
And then you published a children's book?
I wrote and illustrated
What inspired you to do that? And you illustrated it, or
I illustrated it. Yeah, no, I illustrated it as well. I had to learn how to draw in order to illustrate it. So I read a book called "Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain," which is a cool book because it's.
I've heard of the book. Yes.
Yeah, it's essentially you see the world differently. I mean, that's really the sort of the thesis is that it's not your ability, your dexterity, it's your ability to see and basically draw what you see. And so it was kind of cool. I went through one exercise and I was drawing something from a magazine or something like that. And I went, wow, like that's an amazing ear. Not what I'd drawn, but like somebody's ear. And whoever said, what attractive ears that person has. I mean, nobody ever said that, but it was kind of I could appreciate the beauty of an ear.
Do you think, though, to that point, through that exercise, I mean, did you draw before that, or was it just kind of one of those things like, hey, I'm just going to try it out and see where it goes?
Yeah. I mean, it really was. It was I had done so. When I came back from Kilimanjaro, I was on the road for about 3 months, just speaking and trying to make back the money that we'd already spent. And I went to the holidays at my parents' house, and my mother said, you need to do a children's book on the climb. So that kind of planted the seed. In high school, my final semester, I had taken an English class, on a fantasy English class. We read like Narnia books and Madeline L'Engle and The Wizard of Oz, The Little Prince, which, I still give to friends when they have kids, and The Never-Ending Story. And, we wrote papers on them. And I really loved it. And I loved what you could write in a children's book. So I went and did a children's book, and I've written like 6 of them, and I've only drawn 1 of them. So, and it's a little bit hard. I haven't moved as many children's books as I would like. So I've got a bunch in storage as well, unfortunately. So if anybody wants a children's book,
pick up his children's book.
There we go. And you can find those on my website. Send me a message, and we can chriswaddellinc.com, and we can do the children's book, or we can do the graduation speech book. I
love it, man. Well, I cannot thank you enough. This has been absolutely powerful. I love learning from people like yourself. You're just raw, real, down to earth, and I just am so grateful that you came into the studio with us.
Thanks, Cole. I really appreciate it. This has been great. It's been
this won't be the last time, so I look forward to the future, my man.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thank you.